Have you ever felt trapped in your own mind? Like your thoughts just won't stop, replaying the past, worrying about the future, questioning every decision you make? If you've ever laid awake at night, overanalyzing something you said or did, then you know exactly what overthinking feels like. It's exhausting. It steals your peace, kills your confidence, and keeps you stuck in a cycle of stress and doubt. But here's the good news: you don't have to live that way. That's exactly what Stop Overthinking is all about. Written by Nick Trenton, this book is a practical guide to breaking free from negative thought patterns and learning how to quiet your mind. It's not just about positive thinking or wishful optimism. It's about understanding why we overthink, what it does to our brain and body, and how we can train ourselves to let go of unnecessary worry. This book isn't filled with fluff or abstract theories. It's actionable, real, and designed for everyday life. Nick Trenton, the author, has a background in psychology and behavioral science. His writing is straightforward and easy to understand, making complex psychological concepts simple and useful. He focuses on how to take control of your thoughts so they don't control you. This book was released in 2021, and in today's world, where stress, anxiety, and constant information overload are at an all-time high, it's more relevant than ever. We live in a time where our minds are bombarded with social media, news, notifications, and unrealistic expectations. It's no wonder so many people feel overwhelmed. That's why Stop Overthinking is so powerful. It gives you practical tools to break the cycle and regain control over your mental space. What makes this book stand out is its focus on science-backed techniques to retrain your brain. This isn't just think happy thoughts advice. It's about understanding the deeper patterns of overthinking and how to disrupt them. Trenton dives into mindfulness, cognitive behavioral techniques, and simple daily habits that help you shift from stressful rumination to clear, focused thinking. By the time you finish this book, you'll have a whole new approach to handling stress, making decisions, and moving forward in life without getting stuck in endless loops of worry. Whether you're overthinking relationships, work, or just life in general, this book will help you break free and finally find mental peace. Let's begin with Chapter 1, The Dangers of Overthinking, Why We Get Stuck in Our Own Heads. Overthinking feels like it should be useful. It feels like if we just think about a problem long enough, if we analyze every possible outcome, if we replay every conversation, then maybe we'll figure things out. But in reality, overthinking doesn't solve problems, it creates them. Nick Trenton opens Stop Overthinking by explaining why our minds get stuck in endless loops of worry and doubt. The truth is, our brains are wired to look for danger. This is an evolutionary trait meant to keep us safe. Thousands of years ago, being hyper-aware of threats, like wild animals or dangerous enemies, helped humans survive. But today, our brains still search for threats, except now they show up as social anxiety, fear of failure, or worry about the future. Instead of being chased by a tiger, we're haunted by thoughts like, did I say something stupid in that meeting? What if I mess up that presentation? What if they don't like me? Trenton describes how overthinking creates a false sense of control. We believe that if we just think hard enough, we'll prevent bad things from happening. But in reality, overthinking doesn't prevent mistakes. It just makes us more anxious. It actually paralyzes us. We get stuck replaying the past, second-guessing decisions, and fearing the worst instead of taking action. The more we overthink, the more our brain gets addicted to this habit. Science backs this up. When we ruminate on negative thoughts, our brain strengthens those neural pathways, making it even easier to fall into overthinking the next time. This is why breaking free from overthinking isn't just about trying to think positive. It's about rewiring your brain to stop the cycle before it starts. One of the most powerful takeaways from this chapter is this: thoughts are not facts. Just because your mind tells you something doesn't make it true. Your brain might say, I'm not good enough, I'll probably fail, or everyone thinks I'm weird. But that doesn't mean it's reality. The key to overcoming overthinking is learning to challenge these thoughts instead of blindly believing them. By the end of this chapter, Trenton makes one thing clear: overthinking is a mental trap, not a solution. And if you truly want peace of mind, you have to start recognizing when your thoughts are leading you in circles, so you can step out of the loop before it pulls you in. Next is Chapter 2, Breaking the Cycle, How to Stop Overthinking Before It Starts. Now that we understand how overthinking works, the next question is, how do we stop it? If you've been caught in endless cycles of worry, you know that telling yourself to just stop thinking so much never works. That's because overthinking is a habit, and like any habit, breaking it takes strategy, not just willpower. Nick Trenton explains that the first step in stopping overthinking is awareness. Most of the time, we don't even realize we're overthinking until we're already deep in it. It starts with one thought, then another, until suddenly we're spiraling. The trick is to catch yourself early. Trenton suggests using a simple mental checkpoint. Whenever you feel anxious or stuck in thought, ask yourself, am I problem solving or am I just worrying? This question is powerful. Problem solving is active, it leads to solutions and action. Overthinking is passive. It just repeats the same worries without getting anywhere. If you realize you're just worrying, that's your cue to stop engaging with the thought and redirect your mind elsewhere. Another key strategy from this chapter is called Name the Narrator. Our thoughts often feel like truth, but in reality, they're just a narration created by our brain. Trenton suggests giving this voice a name, like Worried Wendy or Doubtful Dan. When you catch yourself overthinking, you can mentally say, oh, here goes Worried Wendy again, which creates distance between you and the thought. Suddenly, you're not just in the thought, you're observing it, which makes it easier to let go. One of the strongest science-backed techniques Trenton shares is the 5-second rule. The idea is simple. Whenever you catch yourself overthinking, count down from 5 and then take action. Why? Because overthinking thrives on delay. The longer you hesitate, the more your brain builds excuses and doubts. By giving yourself 5 seconds to break the cycle, you force your brain into action before it gets stuck. Another practical tip? Interrupt the loop with movement. Studies show that physical movement changes brain activity. The next time you find yourself overthinking, do something active, stand up, stretch, go for a walk, do jumping jacks, whatever. Movement disrupts the thought cycle and forces your brain to shift focus. By the end of this chapter, Trenton makes one thing clear: overthinking isn't something you eliminate overnight, but every time you break the cycle, you weaken its hold on you. It's about small wins, repeated over time. The more you train yourself to recognize and disrupt overthinking, the more your brain rewires itself for calm and clarity. Now that we have strategies to stop overthinking in the moment, the next chapter explores how to retrain your brain so overthinking becomes less automatic over time. Next is Chapter 3. Rewiring your brain, training yourself to think differently. Stopping overthinking in the moment is powerful, but if you want long-term change, you have to go deeper. You have to retrain your brain so that overthinking isn't your automatic response to stress. That's exactly what this chapter is about: how to shift from constant worry and self-doubt to a mindset of clarity, confidence, and action. Nick Trenton explains that the brain is like a muscle. The more you use certain thought patterns, the stronger they get. If you've spent years overthinking, your brain has built deep neural pathways that make it easy to slip into analysis paralysis. But just like you can train your body with exercise, you can train your mind to stop overthinking and focus on what actually matters. Every time you challenge a negative thought, shift your perspective, or redirect your focus, you are literally rewiring your brain. The first step is learning to challenge your automatic thoughts. Most people assume that the thoughts in their head are true, but they're not. They're just habits, mental loops that have been repeated so many times that they feel real. Trenton introduces a powerful technique called the thought audit. Whenever you catch yourself overthinking, pause and ask, is this thought 100% true, or is it just my fear talking? Would I say this to a friend? What's a more realistic way to look at this situation? When you step outside of your own head and analyze your thoughts from a different perspective, you realize that most of them are exaggerated, irrational, or based on self-doubt rather than reality. Another game-changing technique from this chapter is called the what-if flip. Overthinkers love to play the what-if game. What if I fail? What if they don't like me? What if I make the wrong choice? But instead of letting these thoughts spiral into anxiety, you can flip them into a positive direction. What if I succeed? What if this opportunity changes my life? What if this is exactly what I need to grow? By making this small shift, you train your brain to expect possibilities instead of problems, and suddenly, your default reaction to uncertainty becomes more optimistic. Trenton also emphasizes the power of presence. Overthinking thrives on the past and future, replaying mistakes, worrying about things that haven't happened yet. But peace of mind comes from being in the present. He encourages practicing mindfulness, not in a complicated or spiritual way, but in simple moments, paying attention to your breathing, grounding yourself in your surroundings, or fully engaging in what you're doing instead of drifting into endless thoughts. The more you train yourself to focus on the now, the less control overthinking has over you. The biggest takeaway from this chapter is that your brain can change. You are not doomed to overthink forever. Every time you question a negative thought, shift a what-if into a positive, or focus on the present instead of the past or future. You are rewiring your brain for clarity instead of chaos. Now that we've covered how to train your mind to stop overthinking, the next chapter dives into how to replace overthinking with action, because the real antidote to being stuck in your head is movement. So, Chapter 4 is From Overthinking to Action, How to Get Out of Your Head and Into Your Life. If there's one thing overthinking is really good at, it's keeping you stuck. You analyze, question, replay, and doubt, but in the end, nothing actually happens. The hardest truth about overthinking is that it feels like you're doing something productive when really, you're just running in circles. That's why Nick Trenton emphasizes a crucial shift in this chapter. The only way to truly escape overthinking is to replace it with action. Thinking will never create confidence, doing will. One of the biggest reasons people overthink is fear. Fear of making the wrong decision, fear of failure, fear of looking foolish. But here's the reality. No amount of thinking will ever give you absolute certainty. You will never have all the answers, and waiting until you feel 100% ready is the fastest way to stay stuck. Trenton explains that action doesn't come from confidence. Confidence comes from action. The more you do, the more you learn, and the more sure of yourself you become. The problem with overthinking is that it tricks you into believing you need to think more before acting, when in reality, you need to act more to think clearly. One of the most effective ways to break free from this trap is by lowering the stakes. Overthinkers tend to see every decision as life or death. But the truth is, most decisions are reversible. Instead of stressing over the perfect choice, remind yourself that you can always adjust later. Trenton suggests a powerful mental shift. Instead of asking, "What if I fail?" ask, "What's the worst that could actually happen?" Most of the time, the worst-case scenario isn't as bad as your mind makes it out to be. Once you remove the pressure of perfection, taking action becomes much easier. Another practical way to escape overthinking is to set short deadlines for decisions. Instead of letting thoughts drag on for hours or days, give yourself a time limit: 10 seconds for small decisions, 10 minutes for medium ones, and a day for bigger ones. The longer you wait, the more your mind will overcomplicate things. When you train yourself to decide quickly, you short-circuit the overthinking habit and build trust in your own judgment. Trenton also introduces the concept of momentum over motivation. Overthinkers often wait to feel ready before they act, but waiting for motivation is another trap. Action creates momentum, and momentum fuels motivation. The best way to get out of your head is to just do something. Anything that moves you forward, even if it's small. Whether it's writing a single sentence, making one phone call, or taking the first step on a project, movement breaks the mental loop. By the end of this chapter, one thing becomes clear: overthinking and action cannot exist in the same space. The more you train yourself to take action, even when you don't have all the answers, the weaker overthinking becomes. Every small decision made, every step taken, is another victory against the endless cycle of self-doubt. Now that we've covered the importance of action, The next chapter dives into how to maintain mental clarity and protect yourself from slipping back into old habits. Next is Chapter 5, Decluttering Your Mind, Letting Go of Mental Overload. Overthinking doesn't just come from negative thoughts. It also comes from having too much clutter in your mind. If your brain is overloaded with tasks, worries, distractions, and unfinished business, it's no surprise that you feel stuck in constant overanalysis. In this chapter, Nick Trenton dives into the importance of mental decluttering and how simplifying your thoughts can create space for clarity and peace. One of the biggest causes of overthinking is having too many open loops. An open loop is anything that is unresolved, tasks you haven't finished, decisions you keep postponing, conversations you need to have, or even emotional baggage from the past. These unfinished pieces take up space in your brain, creating a constant background noise that makes it hard to focus. Trenton explains that closing these loops is essential to quieting your mind. This can be as simple as writing down everything that's weighing on you and making a plan to either deal with it or let it go. Another powerful technique in this chapter is the mental dump. Overthinkers tend to keep everything in their heads, which leads to overwhelm. Trenton suggests a simple practice. Take a piece of paper and write down everything that's swirling in your mind. Tasks, worries, ideas, things you need to remember. Once it's written down, your brain no longer needs to hold on to it. This alone can give an instant sense of relief, because instead of your mind being cluttered with information, it's all organized in front of you. Trenton also emphasizes the importance of reducing information overload. In today's world, we are constantly bombarded with news, social media, emails, and notifications, which keeps our brains in a state of constant stimulation. Overthinking thrives in this environment because your mind never gets a break. One of the best ways to quiet your thoughts is to limit unnecessary input, reduce screen time, take social media breaks, and give yourself moments of silence throughout the day. When your brain has space to breathe, it naturally becomes calmer. One of the most overlooked sources of mental clutter is holding on to things that no longer serve you. This could be past mistakes, regrets, or even relationships that drain you. Trenton explains that carrying emotional baggage from the past is like trying to run a race with a heavy backpack. You can do it, but it slows you down. Learning to forgive yourself, let go of past failures, and release negative energy creates mental freedom. By the end of this chapter, one thing becomes clear: your mind needs space to function properly. Just like a cluttered room creates stress, a cluttered mind leads to overthinking. The more you simplify, organize, and release what's unnecessary, the more mental clarity you gain. Now that we've tackled mental decluttering, the next chapter will focus on building emotional resilience, so that stress and setbacks don't send you into an overthinking spiral. Next is Chapter 6, Building Emotional Resilience, Handling Stress Without Overthinking. Overthinking often comes from not knowing how to handle stress and uncertainty. When life throws challenges your way, your mind goes into overdrive, trying to analyze every possible outcome, replaying past mistakes, or worrying about what's next. But what if, instead of overthinking, you could develop the emotional strength to handle stress with confidence? That's exactly what this chapter is about: how to build resilience so that when difficulties arise, you can face them without getting stuck in an endless loop of worry. Nick Trenton explains that resilience isn't about avoiding stress, it's about learning how to deal with it effectively. People who handle stress well don't have easier lives. They've just built habits that prevent them from being mentally overwhelmed. One of the most powerful ways to do this is by developing emotional detachment. This doesn't mean ignoring your feelings, but rather, learning to observe them instead of being controlled by them. When you feel stress or anxiety creeping in, instead of reacting immediately, pause and ask yourself, is this thought actually helpful? This small moment of awareness creates space between you and your emotions, making it easier to think clearly. Another crucial part of resilience is reframing your mindset around challenges. Overthinkers tend to see problems as threats, something that could go wrong or something to be feared. But resilient people see challenges as opportunities for growth. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" ask, "What can I learn from this?" This shift in perspective helps you stop seeing stress as something that needs to be feared and start seeing it as something you can handle. Trenton also introduces the idea of emotional anchoring. When life gets overwhelming, it's easy to get lost in negative emotions, but having go-to grounding techniques can keep you steady. One powerful method is focusing on your breath. Studies show that deep breathing slows down your nervous system and tells your brain that you're safe. Another is using physical grounding techniques like touching something textured, holding a cold object, or even just feeling the weight of your feet on the ground. These small practices remind your brain that you are in control, not your thoughts. One of the biggest enemies of resilience is rumination, the act of replaying past mistakes or negative experiences over and over. Trenton explains that breaking free from this cycle requires forgiveness, both for yourself and others. Holding on to resentment or self-criticism only keeps you stuck in the past. Instead of reliving old mistakes, focus on what you can do now to move forward. The past cannot be changed, but how you respond to it is entirely up to you. By the end of this chapter, one thing becomes clear: resilient people don't avoid stress, they develop the skills to handle it without overthinking. The stronger your emotional foundation, the less control stress has over your mind. Now that we've covered how to build emotional resilience, the next chapter will focus on creating habits that prevent overthinking from creeping back into your life. Say next, and we'll continue. Next is Chapter 7, Creating Daily Habits to Prevent Overthinking. Breaking free from overthinking isn't just about learning new techniques. It's about making them a part of your daily life. In this chapter, Nick Trenton focuses on how to build simple, effective habits that prevent overthinking from creeping back in. Because the truth is, if you don't set up a system to keep your mind clear, it's easy to fall back into old patterns. The key is to create small, repeatable actions that keep your brain focused, calm, and in control. One of the most powerful habits is starting your day with intention. Overthinkers tend to wake up and immediately let their thoughts take over, scrolling through social media, worrying about everything they need to do, or getting lost in random thoughts. But Trenton suggests a different approach. Begin each morning by setting a clear focus. Before you even pick up your phone, ask yourself, what's the most important thing I need to accomplish today? This shifts your mind from scattered thinking to a sense of direction. Another simple but effective habit is the 2-minute rule. Overthinking often happens when small tasks pile up and feel overwhelming. Instead of letting unfinished business clutter your mind, train yourself to take action immediately if something can be done in 2 minutes or less. Respond to that email. Make that quick phone call. Put that item away. By handling small tasks right away, you prevent your brain from storing them as mental clutter. Trenton also emphasizes the importance of a nighttime routine that clears your mind. Overthinkers often struggle with sleep because their minds won't shut off. One habit that helps is journaling before bed. Instead of lying awake replaying the day's events or worrying about tomorrow, write your thoughts down. This allows your brain to release stress instead of carrying it into the night. Even just listing out 3 things you accomplished or 3 things you're grateful for can shift your mindset from worry to peace. One of the most overlooked habits to stop overthinking is setting boundaries with information. In today's world, we're constantly bombarded with news, social media, and opinions from others. If you're always consuming information, your brain never gets a break. Trenton recommends designated no-screen time, whether it's 30 minutes in the morning, an hour before bed, or even 1 day a week where you unplug. This habit helps reset your brain and gives you space to process your own thoughts without outside noise. Another game changer is moving your body daily. Overthinking often happens when you're stuck in your head, disconnected from your body. Something as simple as a 10-minute walk, stretching, or any form of movement can interrupt anxious thought patterns and bring you back into the present moment. Physical movement isn't just for fitness, it's a tool to reset your mind. By the end of this chapter, one thing is clear: your habits shape your thoughts. The more you build routines that keep your mind clear, the less power overthinking has over you. Now that we've covered how to create daily habits, the next chapter dives into a deeper issue: how self-doubt fuels overthinking and what you can do to build true self-trust. Next is Chapter 8, Overcoming Self-Doubt, Trusting Yourself to Make Decisions. One of the biggest reasons people overthink is self-doubt. When you don't trust yourself, every decision feels risky. You second-guess your choices, seek constant reassurance, and overanalyze every possible outcome. But here's the truth: confidence doesn't come from having all the answers. It comes from trusting yourself to handle whatever happens. In this chapter, Nick Trenton breaks down how to overcome self-doubt so you can stop overthinking and start living with certainty. Trenton explains that self-doubt is often rooted in fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of making the wrong choice. But the mistake most people make is thinking they need to eliminate fear before they can move forward. That's not how it works. Confidence isn't the absence of fear, it's taking action despite it. Every time you make a decision and move forward, even when you feel uncertain, you build trust in yourself. The more you do this, the quieter your self-doubt becomes. A key technique in this chapter is the 90% rule. Overthinkers tend to obsess over making the perfect decision. But Trenton suggests a different approach. If you're at least 90% sure about a decision, go with it. Stop wasting time searching for absolute certainty because it doesn't exist. Instead of trying to make a perfect choice, make a good choice and adjust as you go. Progress always beats perfection. Another powerful way to combat self-doubt is to keep a confidence journal. Every day, write down one decision you made and why it was the right choice. It doesn't have to be a big decision. It could be as simple as choosing what to eat for dinner or deciding to take a break when you needed it. Over time, this practice rewires your brain to see yourself as someone who makes good choices, strengthening your self-trust. Trenton also emphasizes the importance of stopping the approval-seeking habit. Overthinkers often ask others for advice on every little decision, hoping for reassurance. But constantly seeking validation keeps you stuck in self-doubt. Instead of asking, "What does everyone else think?" start asking, "What do I think?" Give yourself permission to trust your instincts. One of the most eye-opening concepts in this chapter is the idea that no decision is ever truly final. People get paralyzed by overthinking because they treat every choice as permanent. But in reality, most decisions can be adjusted, reversed, or improved later. Instead of worrying about making the right choice, focus on making a choice and learning from it. By the end of this chapter, one thing becomes clear: self-trust is the antidote to overthinking. The more you believe in your ability to handle life's uncertainties, the less you need to overanalyze everything. Now that we've covered self-doubt, the next chapter will tackle something that fuels overthinking in a big way: the fear of failure and how to stop letting it control you. Next is Chapter 9. Conquering the fear of failure, turning setbacks into strength. Fear of failure is one of the biggest triggers for overthinking. It keeps people stuck in endless loops of, "What if I mess up? What if I look stupid? What if things don't go as planned?" But here's the truth: failure isn't the enemy. Overthinking is. In this chapter, Nick Trenton shifts the way we see failure and teaches how to use setbacks as stepping stones instead of roadblocks. Most people fear failure because they've been taught that failing means they aren't good enough. But Trenton explains that failure isn't a reflection of your worth, it's just feedback. It's information. It shows you what works, what doesn't, and what needs to be adjusted. Every successful person has failed. The difference is they don't overthink it, they learn from it and move forward. One of the most powerful mindset shifts in this chapter is learning to separate failure from identity. Overthinkers tend to take failure personally. Instead of thinking, "I failed at this task," they think, "I am a failure." But failure is just an event, not a definition. The key is to reframe failure as a natural part of growth. If you never fail, it means you're not taking risks or challenging yourself enough. Trenton introduces a practical strategy called the failure audit. Instead of avoiding failure, he suggests looking back at times you've failed in the past and asking 3 key questions. What did I learn from this? Did anything good come from it? How can I use this lesson moving forward? What you realize is that most failures weren't as bad as they seemed at the time. In fact, many of them led to new opportunities, personal growth, or valuable lessons. When you see failure in this way, it loses its power to control your thoughts. Another way to overcome the fear of failure is by redefining success. Overthinkers often have perfectionist standards. They believe success means getting everything right the first time. But real success isn't about being perfect, it's about making progress. Trenton encourages setting process-based goals instead of outcome-based goals. Instead of aiming for a perfect result, focus on showing up and putting in the effort consistently. When you measure success by progress, failure no longer feels like a disaster, it just becomes part of the journey. Trenton also explains that the faster you fail, the faster you learn. Instead of overthinking decisions to avoid failure, take action quickly and adjust as you go. Every time you take a risk and survive, you train your brain to see that failure isn't the end of the world. It's just another step toward success. By the end of this chapter, one thing is clear: fear of failure is just an illusion. It's not failure that holds you back, it's the way you think about it. When you stop seeing failure as a threat and start seeing it as a tool for growth, overthinking loses its grip on you. Now that we've tackled failure, the next chapter will dive into one of the biggest obstacles to a clear mind, perfectionism, and how to break free from its impossible standards. Next is Chapter 10, Breaking Free from Perfectionism, Letting Go of Unrealistic Standards. Perfectionism is one of the biggest drivers of overthinking. It makes you feel like nothing is ever good enough. It keeps you stuck in analysis paralysis, afraid to take action unless you're 100% sure everything will be flawless. But here's the truth: perfection is an illusion. It doesn't exist. And the more you chase it, the more you trap yourself in endless overthinking, self-doubt, and frustration. In this chapter, Nick Trenton explains how to break free from perfectionism and start embracing progress over perfection. Perfectionists tend to believe that making mistakes equals failure, but Trenton explains that perfectionism isn't about high standards, it's about fear. The fear of being judged. The fear of not measuring up. The fear of making the wrong choice. But in reality, striving for perfection only holds you back. It keeps you from finishing projects, taking risks, and enjoying life. The key to overcoming perfectionism is to shift your mindset from "it has to be perfect" to "it just has to be good enough." One of the best ways to beat perfectionism is by using the 80% rule. Instead of aiming for 100% perfection, stop at 80%. This might sound strange at first, but most of the time, 80% effort is more than enough to get the job done. Whether it's work, creative projects, or decision-making, letting go of that final 20% of overperfection allows you to move forward instead of getting stuck in endless tweaking and overanalyzing. Trenton also introduces the concept of imperfect action. The idea is simple. Instead of waiting until you're fully ready, start before you feel ready. Make the decision. Send the email. Take the first step. When you act before everything is perfectly planned, you train your brain to be comfortable with uncertainty. Over time, this builds confidence and makes perfectionism lose its grip on you. Another key lesson in this chapter is learning to separate self-worth from achievements. Many perfectionists tie their value to their accomplishments, believing that if they do everything perfectly, they'll finally feel good enough. But Trenton explains that your worth isn't based on how flawless you are. You are enough, whether you succeed, fail, or land somewhere in between. Real confidence comes from accepting yourself as you are, not from chasing impossible standards. Trenton also emphasizes the importance of celebrating small wins. Overthinkers and perfectionists often ignore progress because they're too focused on what still needs to be improved. But shifting your focus to what you've already accomplished rewires your brain to appreciate progress instead of obsessing over perfection. Keep a small wins journal. Write down things you did well each day, no matter how small. This simple habit helps shift your mindset from "I'm never doing enough" to "I'm making progress, and that's enough." By the end of this chapter, one thing becomes clear: letting go of perfectionism is the key to freedom. When you stop obsessing over getting everything right, you free yourself from overthinking and start making real progress. Now that we've covered how to break free from perfectionism, the next chapter focuses on how to embrace uncertainty and stop fearing the unknown. Next is Chapter 11, Embracing Uncertainty, Finding Peace in the Unknown. One of the biggest reasons people overthink is because they fear the unknown. The human brain craves certainty. It wants to predict outcomes, control situations, and feel safe knowing what's going to happen next. But the truth is, life is unpredictable. No matter how much you plan or analyze, there will always be things outside of your control. The question is, do you let uncertainty paralyze you, or do you learn to embrace it? In this chapter, Nick Trenton teaches how to stop fearing the unknown and find peace even when things are uncertain. Many overthinkers believe that if they just think hard enough, they can figure everything out in advance. But Trenton explains that this is an illusion. No amount of thinking can guarantee a perfect outcome. In fact, overanalyzing often creates more anxiety, not less. The key to reducing overthinking isn't to seek more certainty, it's to become comfortable with uncertainty. One of the most powerful strategies in this chapter is learning to trust yourself to handle whatever happens. Instead of asking, "What if something goes wrong?" ask, "Can I handle whatever comes my way?" The truth is, you've already survived so many unpredictable moments in life. You've adapted, adjusted, and made it through. You don't need all the answers right now, you just need to trust that you'll figure things out as they come. Trenton also introduces the "What's the worst that could happen?" exercise. Many times, we fear the unknown because we assume the worst. But when you actually sit down and think about the worst possible outcome, you often realize it's not as terrifying as your brain made it seem. And even if the worst happens, you'd still find a way to deal with it. This realization helps take the power away from uncertainty. Another way to embrace uncertainty is by practicing letting go of control. Overthinkers try to control everything: people's reactions, future events, how things unfold. But the reality is, control is an illusion. The more you try to control everything, the more stressed and anxious you become. Instead, Trenton suggests focusing on controlling what you can and letting go of the rest. You can't control the outcome, but you can control your actions, your mindset, and your response to situations. A simple habit that helps with this is the surrender practice. Every day, remind yourself of something you're letting go of, whether it's the need for certainty, the fear of making a mistake, or the pressure to have everything figured out. Say it out loud or write it down. I release the need to control everything. I trust myself to handle whatever comes my way. This small practice rewires your brain to become more comfortable with uncertainty. By the end of this chapter, one thing becomes clear: uncertainty isn't something to fear, it's something to embrace. When you let go of the need for control and trust yourself to handle the unknown, overthinking loses its grip on you. Now that we've covered how to find peace in uncertainty, the next chapter will focus on how to stay present and stop getting lost in your thoughts. Next is Chapter 12, Staying Present, How to Stop Getting Lost in Your Thoughts. Overthinking pulls you away from the only thing that truly matters, the present moment. When your mind is stuck in the past, replaying old mistakes, or lost in the future, worrying about things that may never happen, you miss out on life as it's happening right now. In this chapter, Nick Trenton explains how to train your mind to stay present, let go of unnecessary mental noise, and fully engage with the world around you. One of the biggest reasons people overthink is because they constantly live in what-if mode. They are either replaying something they wish they could change or stressing about an outcome they can't predict. But Trenton explains a simple truth: the past is gone, and the future isn't here yet. The only thing that exists is right now. The more time you spend in the present, the less power overthinking has over you. The key to breaking free from overthinking is grounding yourself in the present moment. Overthinkers tend to live in their heads, always caught up in thoughts and worries. But your body is always in the now. Trenton suggests simple but powerful techniques like taking deep breaths, paying attention to your surroundings, and focusing on physical sensations, whether it's the warmth of the sun on your skin, the taste of your food, or the feeling of the ground beneath your feet. These small actions pull you out of your thoughts and back into reality. Another way to stay present is by fully engaging in whatever you're doing. Overthinkers often try to multitask, their minds jumping from one thing to the next. But the brain isn't built for constant distraction. Trenton encourages focusing on one thing at a time, whether it's eating, walking, listening, or working. When you train yourself to give full attention to the task at hand, your mind naturally quiets down. A powerful realization in this chapter is that thoughts are just thoughts. Overthinkers often believe that every thought they have is important, but Trenton reminds us that most thoughts are just passing noise. You don't have to react to every worry, doubt, or fear that crosses your mind. Instead, practice seeing your thoughts like clouds in the sky. Let them float by without getting caught up in them. The less you engage with overanalyzing, the less control it has over you. Trenton also talks about the importance of mindful pauses. In today's fast-paced world, people rush from one thing to another without stopping to breathe. But taking small breaks throughout the day, whether it's a moment of silence, a short walk, or just looking around and noticing your surroundings, helps reset your mind and keeps you grounded in the now. Even something as simple as taking 3 deep breaths before starting a task can help clear mental clutter and bring you back to the present. By the end of this chapter, one thing becomes clear: presence is the antidote to overthinking. The more you train your mind to stay in the moment, the less room there is for stress, doubt, and anxiety. Now that we've covered how to stay present and free yourself from racing thoughts, the next chapter will focus on how to simplify your life and remove unnecessary mental clutter. Next is Chapter 13, Simplify Your Life, Clearing Mental Clutter for a Focused Mind. Overthinking doesn't just come from your thoughts. It also comes from your environment, your responsibilities, and the sheer amount of things you try to juggle every day. When life feels overwhelming, your mind gets overwhelmed too. That's why one of the most effective ways to stop overthinking is to simplify your life. In this chapter, Nick Trenton explains how to clear mental clutter, reduce unnecessary stress, and create a sense of clarity and peace. One of the biggest reasons people overthink is because they have too much going on. Too many choices. Too many commitments. Too many distractions pulling them in different directions. Trenton explains that the brain isn't designed to handle constant input. It thrives on simplicity. When you declutter your life, you declutter your mind. The first step to simplifying is learning to say no. Overthinkers often say yes to everything out of guilt or obligation, but the truth is, every time you say yes to something that doesn't truly matter, you're taking energy away from what does. Trenton encourages creating a habit of asking yourself, "Do I really need to do this? Does this bring me value?" If the answer is no, it's okay to let it go. Another way to simplify is by minimizing daily decisions. Decision fatigue is real. The more choices you have to make, the more exhausted your brain becomes, leading to even more overthinking. Trenton suggests cutting down on unnecessary choices by creating routines. Simple habits like planning your meals in advance, setting a consistent morning routine, or even wearing a simplified wardrobe can free up mental space for more important things. The less energy you spend on small, unimportant decisions, the more clarity you have for what truly matters. Trenton also talks about the importance of reducing distractions. In today's world, people are constantly bombarded with notifications, emails, social media updates, and an endless stream of information. The result? A mind that's always on, always processing, always overthinking. Simplifying your life means setting boundaries with technology. Trenton recommends creating no-phone zones, turning off unnecessary notifications, and setting specific times to check emails and messages instead of letting them control your entire day. The more you control your environment, the less it controls you. A powerful realization in this chapter is that simplicity isn't about having less. It's about making space for more of what matters. When you clear out the mental clutter, you create room for peace, creativity, and focus. Overthinkers often get caught up in trying to do everything, but Trenton reminds us that sometimes, doing less leads to more. More clarity, more calm, more presence. By the end of this chapter, one thing becomes clear: a simple life leads to a simple mind. And when your mind is clear, overthinking has no place to hide. Now that we've covered how to simplify your life and create mental clarity, the next chapter will focus on how to build lasting habits that keep overthinking from creeping back in. Next is Chapter 14, building habits that keep overthinking away. Breaking free from overthinking isn't just about learning techniques. It's about creating lasting habits that keep your mind clear, calm, and focused. It's easy to have a breakthrough moment where you feel free from overthinking, but if you don't build daily habits to maintain that clarity, old patterns will creep back in. In this chapter, Nick Trenton explains how to create a mindset that naturally resists overthinking and replaces it with confidence, action, and peace of mind. One of the biggest mistakes people make when trying to stop overthinking is relying on willpower alone. You might tell yourself, "I'll stop overthinking from now on." But without a structured approach, your mind eventually falls back into its usual habits. Trenton explains that the key to overcoming overthinking isn't just about stopping bad mental habits. It's about replacing them with healthier ones. The best way to do this is by making small, consistent changes that gradually rewire the way your brain operates. A major focus in this chapter is the power of routine. Overthinking often thrives in uncertainty and chaos. When your life lacks structure, your brain fills the gaps with unnecessary worry and analysis. Trenton suggests creating simple routines to eliminate mental clutter. This could be something as straightforward as setting a morning routine that grounds you before the day starts, scheduling your most important tasks in advance so you don't waste time overanalyzing what to do next, or setting a shutdown ritual at the end of the day to let go of lingering thoughts. The more structure you add, the less space there is for overthinking. Another crucial habit to develop is decisiveness. Overthinkers often get stuck in decision paralysis, afraid of making the wrong choice. But Trenton reminds us that most decisions aren't as big as we make them out to be. Instead of agonizing over every detail, train yourself to make decisions faster and move on. A simple strategy is the 2-minute rule. If a decision won't have a major impact on your life a year from now, give yourself a strict 2-minute time limit to decide and commit to it. Practicing quick decision-making builds confidence and stops the habit of excessive mental analysis. Trenton also emphasizes the importance of mental detoxing. Overthinking thrives when your mind is constantly overloaded with information. In today's world, where we are bombarded with endless social media, news, and notifications, it's crucial to step back and give your brain space to breathe. Trenton suggests taking breaks from screens, limiting unnecessary news consumption, and even setting a specific, quiet hour each day where you disconnect from digital distractions. Creating mental space reduces the tendency to ruminate and overanalyze. A powerful realization in this chapter is that overthinking doesn't define you, it's just a habit. And like any habit, it can be changed with consistent effort. The more you practice simplifying decisions, creating structure, and giving your mind space to rest, the more natural it becomes to live without overthinking. By the end of this chapter, one thing is clear: freedom from overthinking isn't about a one-time fix. It's about daily habits that create long-term peace of mind. Now that we've covered how to build habits that prevent overthinking from creeping back in, the next chapter will focus on final takeaways and a mindset shift that will allow you to fully embrace a worry-free life. Final chapter is Embracing a Worry-Free Life, the Ultimate Mindset Shift. By now, you've learned powerful strategies to stop overthinking, how to quiet your racing thoughts, simplify your life, and build lasting habits that keep overanalysis from taking control. But breaking free from overthinking isn't just about techniques. It's about adopting a new mindset, a way of seeing the world that naturally leads to peace, confidence, and clarity. In this final chapter, Nick Trenton offers the ultimate mindset shift that will allow you to embrace a life free from unnecessary mental clutter. One of the biggest realizations in this book is that overthinking is a choice. It doesn't always feel that way. When your mind is spinning, it seems like something you can't control. But Trenton reminds us that while you can't always stop thoughts from appearing, you can choose whether or not to engage with them. The moment you realize that you don't have to overanalyze, you take back control. When a doubtful or anxious thought arises, instead of diving into it, simply acknowledge it and let it pass. Overthinking only thrives when you feed it attention. The less power you give it, the weaker it becomes. Another powerful mindset shift is understanding that mistakes and uncertainty are part of life. Overthinkers often analyze everything because they want to avoid failure, rejection, or the unknown. But the truth is, no amount of thinking can give you perfect control over life. Sometimes things go wrong. Sometimes you'll make mistakes. And that's okay. Trenton emphasizes that true confidence doesn't come from avoiding mistakes. It comes from knowing that you can handle whatever happens. Once you stop fearing imperfection, you stop feeling the need to overanalyze every situation. One of the most freeing lessons in this book is the idea that you don't need all the answers to move forward. Overthinkers get stuck because they feel like they need to figure everything out before taking action. But the reality is, clarity comes from action, not thinking. The more you do, the more you learn, and the more things naturally fall into place. Life isn't meant to be solved in your head, it's meant to be experienced. As this book comes to a close, Trenton leaves us with one final takeaway: you are not your thoughts. Just because a worry crosses your mind doesn't mean it's true or important. Your mind is like a radio station, constantly broadcasting different thoughts. You get to choose which ones to tune into and which ones to ignore. When you stop identifying with every anxious thought, you free yourself from the cycle of overthinking. The journey to overcoming overthinking isn't about silencing your mind completely. It's about learning to let thoughts come and go without getting stuck in them. It's about living in the present, trusting yourself, and embracing the uncertainty of life with confidence. As you move forward, remember that overthinking is just a habit, and habits can be changed. The more you practice living with clarity and ease, the more natural it becomes. With that, we've reached the end of this audiobook summary. But this isn't the end of your journey. It's just the beginning of a new way of thinking, a new way of living. You now have the tools to break free from overthinking and step into a life of peace, clarity, and confidence. The question is, are you ready to embrace it? So finally, now what we get: how to break free from overthinking for good. These key takeaways will serve as reminders whenever you feel yourself slipping back into old patterns. Overcoming overthinking isn't about never having intrusive thoughts again. It's about learning how to manage them in a way that keeps you calm, clear, and in control. One of the most important takeaways is that overthinking is a habit, not a personality trait. Many people label themselves as overthinkers, believing it's just who they are. But the truth is, overthinking is something you've trained your brain to do, and just like any habit, it can be untrained. The more you practice letting go of excessive thoughts, the easier it becomes to live without them. Another major lesson is that action is the antidote to overthinking. Overthinkers get stuck in their heads because they believe they need to have everything figured out before making a move. But Trenton emphasizes that clarity comes from doing, not thinking. The next time you feel paralyzed by indecision, take a small step forward. Even imperfect action is better than staying stuck in your own thoughts. A powerful realization in this book is that you don't have to believe every thought you have. Overthinkers tend to engage with every worry, doubt, or fear that pops into their heads. But not all thoughts are useful or even true. Learning to step back, observe your thoughts, and let go of the ones that don't serve you is key to breaking free from overthinking. Another game-changing takeaway is the idea that uncertainty is a natural part of life. Overthinking often comes from a fear of the unknown, but the reality is, you will never have full control over everything. Instead of trying to predict and plan for every possible outcome, focus on building the confidence that you can handle whatever comes your way. Once you accept that you don't need certainty to move forward, you stop getting trapped in endless mental loops. One of the most practical tools in this book is the power of staying present. Overthinking thrives in the past and future, but it loses its grip when you anchor yourself in the now. Simple techniques like focusing on your senses, practicing mindfulness, and eliminating unnecessary distractions can keep your mind from wandering into unnecessary analysis. Another key lesson is that simplifying your life leads to a clearer mind. Overthinking is often fueled by too much input, too many decisions, too much information, too many responsibilities. By reducing mental clutter, setting boundaries with technology, and streamlining your daily routines, you create space for more peace and less stress. And finally, the biggest takeaway of all, you are not your thoughts. Just because a worry appears in your mind doesn't mean it's important, or even real. You have the power to choose which thoughts to engage with, and which to let pass. The moment you stop identifying with every little worry, you take back control of your mind and your life. Breaking free from overthinking is a process, but every small step counts. The more you practice these principles, the more natural they become. You don't have to live inside your head anymore. Life is happening right now, and it's time to fully experience it. If you found this summary insightful and valuable, don't forget to show your support by subscribing to the Mindful Brief on YouTube. Hit the like button if you enjoyed this audiobook summary, share it with your peers, friends, or family who might benefit from it, and leave a comment below with your thoughts. Your engagement helps us create more in-depth and valuable content for you. Stay tuned for more summaries, insights, and strategies to elevate your knowledge and career. Subscribe now and be part of the journey.